From the moment the first performer stepped into the spotlight on a Broadway stage, there was someone in the dark taking notes, a critic. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Broadway Unscripted. This episode is Critics on Critics. For much of Broadway's modern history, a critic's role carried real power. When Frank Rich was chief theater critic of the New York Times, his reviews were so influential, they shaped not just audience opinion, but a show's commercial fate. It's why he earned the industry nickname, the Butcher of Broadway. Today, the data tells a more complicated story. According to the latest Broadway League data, the number one reason audiences choose a show is personal recommendation, and that holds true across every age group. When people look for information, Instagram leads, followed by Google, and then word of mouth. Traditional reviews are still part of the ecosystem, but they're no longer the primary driver. So what does that shift mean for professional criticism and for critics like me? On this edition of Broadway Unscripted, we are examining just how changing audience behavior, new platforms, and a more diverse theater-going public are reshaping the role, reach, and responsibility of the critic. And to unpack all that, I am joined by Jesse Green, a former chief theater critic of the New York Times and now culture correspondent. Chris Peterson, founder and editor of OnStage Blog, and Elysa Gardner, theater critic for the New York Sun and fellow critic and friend at New York Stage Review. And a note to our audience, as we talk, you will be able to see audience voices joining us live by way of our YouTube channel. Bear in mind, this is only our second episode, so we're not expecting to hear from too many of you, but you're all welcome. You'll see it appear right at the bottom of your screen. So let's get into it. Jesse, I want to start with you because it used to be that a Times review could make or break a show, and not anymore, obviously. And you were in that power seat. And so I have to ask, what changed?
Well, all the things that you mentioned in your introduction changed and altered the ecosphere of theater and how people get their information. But I'm not completely convinced it has really been true since Frank Rich left that hot seat. And it was pretty hot when he left it. My former colleague, Ben Brantley, had the seat for quite a long time alone. And during his time there, I feel that the power began to shift. It seemed to me by the time I was in the seat, I really couldn't kill a show, and I tried. But the power had shifted to a narrower one, which was, of course, as always, to inform and educate the public about what's going on in the way that I, as a kid, experienced many miles from New York. I would read reviews to know what was happening in the world. But to promote a great small show that would not necessarily be able to reach large audiences or to make a profit, or that may not have even been intended to make a profit, that power I still had, or my position still had, and I think still does. And I think we shouldn't, in saying that criticism has vastly changed, which is true, we should not throw out with that some of the good things criticism of the type we've practiced can still do and needs to do in a more narrow commercial environment.
On a personal level, I can imagine that. I mean, obviously, you were credited or blamed for a show's rise or fall, and that had to be a lot of pressure. Is that something you don't miss, or was the pressure okay for you?
I don't miss that. I felt it was my responsibility to tell my truth. I tried not to be mean, particularly about performers. It's almost never their fault. But I was given the chair. I had to fill it. So I didn't want to hurt people, and I tried not to. But some things that I saw were despicable. The kinds of words that don't get put on the marquee, foolish, blah blah blah, all that kind of thing. And I will admit, there's a kind of show where it's a pleasure to say those things.
Yeah, right. Did you ever have to pull your punches though? Just
Yes.
out of concern for somebody's hurt feelings?
No, it was right after the pandemic when theater started returning. I tried to be more generous because it was great that people were putting stuff on the stage at all,
Mm-hmm.
and that some people were coming, and we all remember what a bad scene that was at that time. And I just couldn't. I didn't have it in me to go hard after a show, but that wore off pretty quickly.
I was going to say, yeah, it did. Chris, I want to bring up something. You have this blog, the OnStage blog, and I think it's terrific. And when Jesse stepped down as as the chief theater critic at the Times, you wrote, "What comes next for theater criticism?" And I'm going to quote you here. I'm going to read this, and I have the full quote that we put up on the screen. You said, "Theater in 2025 is not what it was in 2017. The art form has shifted, so has the audience, and so has the way we talk about it. The next era of theater criticism will include not just reviews, but essays, conversations, video, and social media engagement. The new critic must be as comfortable on TikTok as they are at the public. They must be a trusted voice in a fractured cultural landscape, someone who can advocate, interrogate, and contextualize all at once." Wow, that's a really tall order, my friend. So how many, there's so many divergent interests to satisfy. How does one critic accomplish all of that? How could they possibly?
Yeah, that's a very tough question. I mean, I think, and Jesse said this earlier, I mean, Broadway's not Broadway anymore. It's a content ecosystem. We have, tours that are doing sit downs in Broadway houses. We have stunt casting that's driven by TikTok reach, and audiences who often kind of arrive already knowing kind of how they're supposed to feel about a piece. So you have this preconceived notion about, what a theater experience is going to be like. So yeah, for the critic post 2025, and I think a lot of outlets and networking and different types of platforms are looking for this person to be this omni-channel type of person that can not only write a 1,000-word review, but also hop on TikTok, have a navigation to be able to read social media waves and things like that. And it's almost like they're looking for a unicorn in a way. And I think that puts immense pressure on critics who either aren't trained that way or don't want to do that, and things like that. And I also fear that it also will lead to people that, to be quite frank, have no business reviewing shows and things like that it just have that more social media hot take background that want to get into this. So I think it's gonna be really interesting to see what kind of voices emerge in the next couple of years in this industry.
Yeah, when we're talking about the future of drama criticism, the Broadway League put out its annual report last month talking about the Broadway demographics, and when it came to critics, it was rather depressing. And we put some of the graphics up on the screen to show all of you. It's hard for me to read, but anyway. It was broken down in terms of the age of the audience, and when you see what influences or what are the motivating factors that influence a person's decision to see a show, personal recommendation, as we mentioned at the top, is the most provides the audience with the most influence, but all the way down is critics' reviews at 9.1%. And that is in the 25 to 49-year-old demographic, which I guess would be the most popular age for audience members. And in fact, I think that it was the average age for a theater goer to Broadway is 41 years old, according to that Broadway League report. But we have, did we put up the other graph on the screen? That when it gets to the under 25s, this is really depressing, but not unexpected, that critics' reviews only amount to 5% of the folks saying that's where they go to get their make up their minds to determine what they want to see. The Broadway audience is obviously much younger and more diverse and far less centralized in where they get their Broadway information. So the big question is, are critics still writing for the audience, or for an industry that no longer reflects who's actually in the seats? I want to ask you that, Elysa. Who is your audience when you read a review?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, the whole premise of critics determining what people will see, what they want to see, is something I kind of have mixed feelings about, because I read a review because I love the writer, to be entertained, to be informed. I mean, there are writers I read, like Jesse, because I know who they know what they're talking about, and because I love their writing. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to be, it will definitely play a role, but it doesn't mean that I'm, going to determine whether a show is good or bad. I mean, there are some of my favorite writers are people like I vehemently disagree with, and I strongly believe that every review is subjective. I think that's something that we have to, something that I think is wonderful, somebody else could hate, and that's valid. But yeah, I mean, the graphics you were showing were a little concerning, because I saw things there. I mean, personal recommendation, obviously, but also, familiar with the material, and want to see a certain performer. I mean, that's of course why we have so many film adaptations, so many jukebox musicals, people paying $900 to see Denzel Washington in a very meh production of Othello. Yeah. So, I think, the role of the critic is changing as media is expanding. I mean, that's sort of inevitable. And as somebody who is, of a certain age myself, I wonder, I was surprised to see that 41 is the average age, because, I'm used to being, particularly when I see plays, being surrounded by a lot of older people. But I guess that you're counting the, thousands of 12-year-olds and 16-year-olds whose parents take them to see Wicked and The Lion King, right? That probably weights it also.
But can I just jump on what you said, Elysa?
Sure, please. Yeah.
And say that I don't think it's as grim as those statistics indicate. I mean, it isn't happy, but for one thing, although the number of people who say they get their information or they decide based on reviews is low, the reviews have other functions, as you were indicating, Elysa, and they also inform the other categories. So whether articles get written about a show, well, that typically will follow on the reviews. Whether people have heard about the show will often follow on the reviews. People's personal recommendations, in my experience, are often influenced by what they heard somebody important said, or somebody with a nice piece of real estate in the paper said. So I think that it's a little bit better than that looks. But also, I think we do have to accept that the consumer reporter, or the consumer advocate part of our jobs, which was never something I was that interested in anyway,
me neither,
is gone. That's just completely sliced off. That doesn't mean there isn't still an important role, even if that role is more, kind of misty and drifting through the atmosphere of the theater world, and influencing in some cases the people who make artistic choices, as well as the people who might come. So I'm not, in fact, all that down on what a great critic might still be able to do.
I was very curious to see how things have changed in the past years in terms of how much influence critics have in people's decisions and what to see. And so I reached out to the Broadway League to see if they could share the data from years ago. And one thing that caught my eye was that 10 years ago, instead of that 9% that you saw there in terms of how many people rely on critics, 10 years ago, it was almost 22% of the populace was listening to the critics. There, obviously, there's a lot that would explain that, the social media influence and all of that. But things changed dramatically, apparently, during COVID. And I have to assume the main reason for that is people are home, they're surfing the web, and they're getting, more comfortable and accustomed to reading other opinions online that, and they didn't need to see what the critics. Also, nothing was opening. So they were getting all their theater information online. I have to point out, there was an article in Puck recently, and it referred to the movies, critics in the movies. And the article was all about the dishonesty of Rotten Tomatoes. Now, I don't want to get into that, but that's an aggregate of movie opinions. But there was a line that struck me, and the line was, "The reality is that the professional critic is a dying breed." And I want to ask the three of you: do you agree with that? Are we a dying breed, and are we doomed for extinction?
Well, objectively, we're a dying breed. I mean, fewer and fewer papers or publications of any sort have a professional critic. So, there's no ignoring that. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
Will we go to zero? No, I don't think that will happen.
How about you, Elysa? What do you think? Will we go to zero?
Well, I think in terms of when you say professional paid, yes. I mean, to be really blunt about it, like if you expect to make money as a theater critic, my daughter's a freshman in college. I said, whatever you do, if you're going to be a journalism major, which she isn't, by the way, she is not, arts criticism is not the way to go. And that is because of, like so many other things, we're talking about advances and trends in digital technology. The fact that you don't have to be a professional critic. You don't have to be a paid critic to have your opinion out there, mixed in sometimes interchangeably or seemingly interchangeably with people who still make money doing this.
Mm-hmm. Does it bother you at all, though, that the professional studied experience of a veteran theater critic's voice is drowned out by all of the opinions online? Because I have to say, it hurts me a little bit to think that people don't care what I have to say. People don't care about my opinions. And I know that sounds like an ego, but just in the ecosphere of culture, I fear there's a sort of a dumbing down of the audience because they're not really listening to people who know better.
And I think AI. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No, go for it. Yeah.
No, I think, and I think AI plays a role in that. When you have major tech people referring to all writers, not just journalists, as data owners, as I heard Sam Altman use that term once. I mean, how much do you trust what you read? Who's to say who's writing anything at this point now?
Yeah.
But yeah, there is that basic line between professional and amateur. And it's good that it's become more democratic, that more people can weigh in. I mean, I think that's a good thing, but I also think that, we have all, been passionate about theater and read about it and learned about it and, made money writing about it. So I do think that there is something to be said for that.
Chris, you're a young guy. I'm curious about your thoughts on all of this, because you're far more savvy with social media and maneuvering. But is there any concern on your part about the lack of the professional theater critic voice?
Yeah, there definitely is a concern. In my personal opinion, long form criticism still absolutely matters, and I think there's a population out there of theater fan that, deeply wants this almost historical record, and that goes beyond just a hot take, on social media. They really want a thorough adjudication or evaluation of a show. And I love going back and reading reviews from, the 1970s and 60s and beyond, these legendary shows, to find out, what did the critics back then think? How right or wrong were they in hindsight? So I think that there's definitely that desire out there from people. I hope that traditional platforms and outlets will still value that voice and compensate that voice properly and give it all the access. But, going back to the audiences themselves, I mean, that's the audience, the Broadway audience right now. And I'm sure Jesse and Elysa have seen this themselves, is more diverse than ever. I mean, they're diverse in their taste, their background, their access to seeing how a show is made. So that also, infects their bias. So it's like, if they love an actor that's in a show, and God forbid we say something, bad about that actor's performance, it's like, it's almost like a personal insult. So, it's interesting about who we're kind of writing for nowadays. You can't just write for that imagined one reader anymore. It's got to be this whole, type of population that wants different things. And thankfully, I don't, my publication is not nearly, as big or impactful as the publications that Elysa and Jesse write for. So I can't even imagine, the thought process that goes behind, that and editing. But, I think with the main responsibility, I think, going forward with audiences is, I think good criticism will meet audiences where they are, but not pander to them. And thankfully, I haven't seen a lot of that. But I am concerned that with the rise of social media, the importance of clicks and likes and, things like that, you might start to see some of that stuff trickle in.
Yeah, there's a cacophony of opinions out there that, just overwhelm us. And it's hard to know who to pay attention to and where to go.
I think we should say that, Broadway, if we're looking at that part of the industry, is a commercial business. And that is where we feel the greatest loss of our influence. They have a million ways around us, although they're still desperate for that quote. And they'll do almost anything, including torturing your prose, to get it. But as I indicated earlier, a lot of the smaller or more serious, more avant-garde, or just, less publicized stuff desperately needs critical attention just to get to the level where people can consider whether they, for their own reasons, want to see it. Mm-hmm. And one of the unfortunate things is that many publications are dropping their coverage of that sector of the business, which is the sector where they can have the most influence at this point.
Yeah. When you guys sit down to write a review, what matters most? Is it the craft? Is the originality of it, the cultural impact, the audience response? What is your philosophy of theater criticism? Elysa,
definitely ignore the audience response. But go ahead, Elysa.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, you're muted.
Yes, thank you. I would say my response is visceral, for lack of a better word. Did it move me? And I think of it again because I think criticism is subjective by nature. My review is my individual response. I make sure all the facts are correct. I make sure I do as much research as I can. If it's a topic, a new play, a topic I don't know as much about, but at the end of the day, does it move me? And does it make me laugh? Does it make me cry? Does it make me think? And if a play is trying too hard, a play or a musical is trying too hard to impress me or to be clever, that's something that really can get my goat. Some of my favorite creators, people like, Stoppard and Sondheim, are thought of as famously clever and cerebral, but that's not why I love them so much. It's because they make me laugh and cry and think. So yeah, it's quite personal. I don't think about who am I writing for. I really don't. I just sort of assume that I'm writing for a wide variety of people and that I'm giving my opinion, my subjective view.
Mm.
I think it's much more helpful, although not as popular as we've learned, to offer a kind of steady point of view that people will get to know. They will also know that they don't like it when you say you like this kind of thing, and that's useful. You triangulate what your taste is. I grew up doing that. I read John Simon. Many of us knew him. I don't want to step on any toes, but he's dead. Kind of a horrible person. And he wrote with frank anti-Semitism, homophobia, and all
racism, sexism.
Oh my God, the descriptions of women.
Elizabeth Taylor, Liza Minnelli.
But I knew you sort of know how to account for that in reading it, and the reading was great. And you could sort of go, ick, he likes that, I'm not, whatever. It was a wonderful way to understand through a perverse point of view, along with other critics who had a different way of writing, what I might think is good or not. And so when I was writing criticism until a few months ago, I just assumed that I am the only person speaking here, and the best I can do is to explain why I feel what I feel about something. I really cannot narrowcast that to each individual sector of the population that might be reading it or thinking about going to a show, and I don't think that would be very useful. Even if that is what people say they want, I actually don't think it's useful. But quickly, I'll give you my quick answer. What do I think about? What do I think about when I'm writing? I think about, what does the author want us to experience? How well has the production made that happen? And was it worth doing? Is having that experience one that I think is valuable or important, or at least worth the $100? But that's about it. I'm not interested in what other people think, because that's for them to be interested in.
Yeah. For me, it was always a matter of, did the production accomplish what it set out to do?
Right.
If it's a comedy, was it funny? If it's a tragedy, did I feel a catharsis? And yes, and there is an emotional component, but with the caveat that we all have personal biases. I remember reading, there was one critic at the Daily News who shall remain nameless, but he said that he's very, very partial and has never panned a review about wealthy people. He loved, Noel Coward type stories, but he confessed that, anything that involved, the elite was just really exciting for him. And I remember thinking, all right, at least he's confessing to that, but then don't review those shows, because, you're not being objective.
Oh, I disagree, Roma, because we all have those things, and there's so many of them in each of us that we basically eventually eliminate any possible thing we could write about. A very bad trend that I think is now beginning to ease up a little bit is the call for critics to be matched in finer and finer slices of identity to the material they're going to cover. To the point where you'd have to have an AI robot to, specifically programmed to see this show, because supposedly no one else could really understand it. Well, if that's the case, then there's something wrong about that show. I think any of us should be able to see anything, and it should be profitable, if we're good enough writers, to hear what we have to say about it. That said, I think we need a much wider variety of voices doing that, and we're not really getting that. I mean, we're getting a lot of uneducated voices, but not a lot of educated voices.
I'll tell you, I try to overcome my biases, and I'll give you kind of an example here. Oh, Mary is a big hit, but that's not. I don't love that show, although I can appreciate it, and so. If I was an audience member, I'd say, that's not my thing. But as a critic, I can understand that the type of humor, the Black humor, the irreverence, is something that a lot of people do enjoy. And so that show, in my opinion, would deserve a rave, only because it did accomplish its objective. So, that's how I approach a review, apart from my personal feelings about it. And I know we're getting into the weeds here, but it's interesting how we go through that. All right, let's move on, because I want to ask you guys, was there ever a review you wished you could take back and reverse history? Was there anything you regret writing? Elysa? I think you're muted.
I am. I have to go first. Gosh, there was a small review off Broadway, may have even been off Broadway, just a few years ago, of a play that I found so obnoxious and self-serving, and it was written by a young guy. And I tend, typically if I don't like a play very much, I mean, I'm in the, because I'm not chief critic at the New York Times, I have the luxury of, if I really hate something and there are no stars involved, I can say to my editor, look, I don't want to trash this. But in this case, I was so put off by this guy and this play that I panned it in a very, I went after him in a way that I don't normally do, like deeply sarcastic, scathing. And I got a letter from someone I'm convinced was a family member or friend, that only reaffirmed that my initial instincts were right, that I should have let it go, or that I should have just passed on that one. Yeah, I've certainly never written a positive review that I regretted, even though I'll go back and I'll say, and I've certainly seen shows and come back to them and said, oh, I didn't like that quite as much. I didn't like that, or I didn't hate that quite as much. But yeah, so that's the one that stands out. I don't even remember the name of the play or the actor. And the actor, I think, was also the writer and maybe the director. It was a vanity project. It really peeved me. So.
Okay, Jesse, you're on.
Well, it's not the kind of regret you mean, but there have been one or two reviews that produced responses from people associated with the production, as Elysa was just indicating, that were so virulent that I wished I hadn't done it, just to not expose myself to that. But seriously, I had a security problem. I had to.
I was going to say,
deal with that. I mean, you wouldn't think, we're talking about plays, or in that case, a musical, and still, for whatever reason, people are more touchy these days. I think maybe we know the reason. Anyway.
Yeah.
So I regret that just because it was hard on me. But in terms of the rest of it, there's a couple lines here and there I remember, and I go, oh, I wish I hadn't said that. And it's usually, just a snotty little tossed off line that was funny in context, but wasn't really thoughtful about the work involved. But in terms of whole reviews, no, because it's a snapshot of that moment. And I've had the good fortune to be at it long enough, although not as long as, some people, that I've seen a show again and written a revised opinion, I've had a complete change of heart about it. One of those was the Brandon Jenkins play, Appropriate.
Oh, yes.
Which I had not liked the first time I saw it. And then 10, 15 years later, whatever it was, I liked it quite a lot. And I think that's instructive too, because readers know that their feelings change about things. So why shouldn't ours?
Yeah. I'm curious, how many shows have you guys reviewed in your life?
At least more than I'm sure.
No, maybe not. How many?
In the dozens for me, but I wouldn't say hundreds.
Okay. Well, I'm in the thousands because I've been doing this since '86. And
how many did you say, Roma?
More than 3,000.
I've done about 1,500.
Okay, Elysa? You're muted. Okay.
She's saying 250,000.
She said, okay. All right. Just in closing, I'm just very curious, since we've all seen so much theater, what are your top 3 shows of all time? And it could be performances, but what have been your best memories in the theater? Chris, let's start with you.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll give you three. I mean, for me, what kickstarted my interest and passion in theater was my fourth grade field trip to go see the original production of The Secret Garden on Broadway.
Oh yeah.
And so sitting up in the balcony, and I probably that had a lot to do with seeing Mandy Patinkin sing live. But that was a transformative experience. The next one, The Woman in Black. I saw a regional production of that, and honestly, the most terrified I've ever been in a public space. That show, when done correctly, is just a haunting, terrifying experience that still sits with me today. And yeah, just I was just sitting in that seat, just being amazed by what I was seeing. And not to sound basic, but being a 44-year-old that unfortunately wasn't around when things like Hair came out and Sunday in the Park, but Hamilton for me still is one of the best theatrical experiences I've ever seen live. I often talk about the game changers for musical theater and theater in general, and for me sitting in that theater, I got to see it with the original cast in there last week. It was just a transformative, like I can't believe I'm watching this. So yeah, those are the three for me.
Yeah. All right, who wants to go next?
Well, I didn't think about productions so much as performances, but I will say, because Chris reminded me, that the first show I saw, and maybe for all of us, that's going to be, if it was any good, one of our best, was the first national tour of Fiddler on the Roof in Philadelphia. And I was
Who
sick.
would have you?
I think it was a Topol, the Israeli actor, T-O-P-O-L, who was not a tooth polish, but an actor. Anyway, but I was too young to have taken note of things like that. But I just remember in the car going home, my mother and I was sitting behind her. She was in the passenger seat, weeping on the right side of the car. My father and my brother like, what the hell are they doing? Why So that was obviously transformative for me, because the combination of drama and music is really my sweet spot, and the sadness of family and history is also my sweet spot, and it really killed me. And in a similar way, I mean, I don't love the show Ragtime, but Josh Henry currently on Broadway singing in that show is breaking my heart. I just watched a video of the recording session for the show, and I really had to be picked up off the floor.
Yeah, me too.
But it's not the show; it's that performance. And just because recently, Andrew Scott in Chekhov, when he did all the characters in his version of Vanya, was really amazing to me. A great performance in a great adaptation of a great play.
Great. Okay, Elysa.
Well, I was thinking about this, and I'm limiting myself to the years that I've been writing about theater, which is still a long time. But I'm a musical theater girl from way back. That's what I did. I performed in high school and college, and that's the center of my wheelhouse. And yet, I'm only going to pick one musical, and that would be Bart Cheer's revival of South Pacific. That's the one that stands out for me. It was just glorious. I mean, my husband said it was like discovering a new wonder of the world. It was everything a musical should do. Made me, all of these shows that I'm going to mention, and I'll mention them briefly, made me cry. That's the ultimate mark. The other one was The Pillow Man. The original Broadway production, huge fan, and God, talk about, combining being haunting and just great storytelling when that green monster came on stage, I don't know if you guys remember, but I burst into tears, like where people surrounding me were looking at me. And then I thought I'd pick a much more intimate, very intimate one. Another playwright I love, Samuel D. Hunter, A Case for the Existence of God, was off Broadway a few years ago. And I mean, he may be like my favorite. I couldn't pick one favorite contemporary writer, but he's in the top tier. I mean, it just, like, God, he writes with so much compassion and so much wisdom, and his characters have such dignity, and it just moved me. Again, that last scene of that play, like the last scene of Little Bear Ridge Road, the last speech, I was weeping the whole time. So, yeah.
So we're but just a bunch of crybabies, is what
Yeah.
I mean.
Hey, listen, that to me is if you can make me cry, you'll
What
get a
about
good
you,
review.
Roma?
I'm really aging myself, but one of the first shows I saw when I moved back to New York was Amadeus, Ian McKellen's performance. And, from that first moment when you heard the heavy breathing, remember as an elderly Salieri, I was blown away, and it inspired me so greatly. And then later on, Janet McTeer's A Doll's House. I don't know if you guys had the pleasure and privilege to see that, but I would say that's my top female performance of all time. I've not, and everything has come really close, but that was such a high bar. I could not imagine anybody excelling beyond that. And then just because, and we talk about transformative, a chorus line. When I was in high school, and we flew in from Pittsburgh, where I was growing up, my mom took me to see it, and I was just dumbstruck. I didn't know theater could do that. And I was a theater enthusiast fan. As a young kid, I was in plays all my life, but I had no idea that was possible. And so it inspired me beyond belief. And maybe it's why I'm, doing theater criticism today. I tried to act, and I wasn't very good at it. And I tried to produce, I tried to direct, but
I wasn't very good either, but I
was great.
But you're not doing it now. Yeah, we missed that. All right. Chris, Jesse, Elysa, thank you so much. This was a wonderful conversation. And we hope folks listening and watching us, we hope you enjoyed the panel.
Thank you, Roma. Great.
It was a pleasure. Conversations like this only continue with your support. So subscribing to our YouTube channel at Fifth Row Center isn't just a click. It's how this program survives, and it's how we fund independent coverage and keep producing thoughtful journalism-driven conversations about theater that don't exist anywhere else. On our next Broadway Unscripted, we are pulling back the curtain, and we're going to try to help you find bargains. As we all know, it's just so exorbitant to buy these theater tickets, from rush and lotteries to last-minute releases, digital strategies, and special perks for first responders, college students, and more. We have the details. And the timing couldn't be better. It's just ahead of New York City's annual Winter Outing Week, running January 20th through February 12th, when nearly 600 restaurants offer prefix menus and Broadway shows roll out 2-for-1 ticket deals. So to my panel, I cannot thank you again for joining us. And coming up, just a little more of a tease, we profile Jose Solis's BIPOC Critics Lab at the Public Theater, and my review of The White Lotus's Carrie Coon, starring in the Broadway play Bug. All right, that was written by her husband Tracy Letts. All right, that's all, folks. It's been a thrill, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again.
Thank you, Roma.